Hey, thanks for joining. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, um, so how's it going? You just recently put out a game.
Yep. We put out that's the first VR project we've ever done.
Mhm.
We being like the whole studio I'm working with and myself, like just in general. And yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Wow, that's so it's a night in the attic.
Yeah, it's a night in the attic. So it's like as far as VR games go, it's not nothing crazy, like nothing too wild or I guess like uncomfortable is the word we'd use.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of like being in an attic playing with a children's toy, and it's just supposed to be something really cozy. And yeah, I think we sort of hit the nail with that. So it's I don't know, it's something simple as far as VR craziness goes.
Right. And so it's like you're holding a box, and then the box has like a ball in it that you're trying to roll around, and the ball is like a character in a cool fantasy world. That's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, that's sort of the gist. So it's if you've ever played with I think they're called marble labyrinths, but you
Okay.
could get little toy ones too, where it's you're just trying to get them all or marble to the center of a maze.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. We just looked at that. We looked at like different toys and like what are fun little like examples of just like playful, non-stressful things to do. And yeah, that one seemed like we could build a whole RPG platformer out of it. So
That's
so
a
that's
fun
that's
idea.
mostly what the game is. Yeah.
I really like the atmosphere in it. It's got a really nice, like happy fantasy world. I kind of I want to just play it and like see the next scene and see the next area. It's got a really nice
Yeah, that's
thing.
great. Yeah, Andy, our art director, has a history of I'd say cozy games. Like
Yeah.
everything she ends up making comes out cozy. So
Yeah, you guys did a good job. And so
yeah.
how was like the end of the development for it? How was the release of it? How'd that all go?
So this is like I've done a few projects in the past, or been like part of teams in the past that have finished projects.
Mhm.
Relative to those, and those weren't crazy or anything, but relative to those, this is the smoothest project I think I've ever worked on. We had a team that was just really well oiled. Most of us had worked together before, and even with like the challenges of VR and sort of like going into tech we didn't understand yet,
Mhm.
I think the whole process was just like everybody on the team was surprised at how sort of smooth it went and how calm everything was. It was almost like we were waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never dropped. So
Hmm.
yeah,
That's
so that
the
went
first
well.
I've heard somebody say that. Like, oh, it was totally fine, no problems. That's great
Yeah,
to
yeah,
hear.
yeah.
Though.
It's rare.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. I'm especially impressed that there's no major problems when, like you said, first VR project. What was it like working in VR?
So working in VR was definitely like a new challenge. I think like there's the obvious things. There's different technologies, and I mean you're rendering everything sort of twice now. I come from the technical background, so for me, a lot of the challenges were just things like how do we optimize this? It's like running on a phone but in high def, and we're not allowed to like have any lag because it'll actually make people sick. So that's a new problem too. It's
Hmm.
like normally when you're testing a game, it's like it can get a little annoying, but the bugs don't make you want to like get sick and like run to the bathroom.
Speak for yourself.
This Right?
Speak for
Okay,
yourself.
all right. Depending on the bug, no, you're right. There are some, but yeah, that was really hard in the beginning, and then and just sort of working with a headset the whole time. I mean, often you're testing a game and then hitting play and then making a few changes and then testing again. But with a physical headset, you're usually trying to balance it on your head and like try to debug at the same time. It's just like a practical juggling act.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was pretty complex.
What can you tell me? What's your role in like how big is the team, and what are you responsible for on the team?
Yeah, so the team, my DL Studios, is about 10 full time people, I believe.
Hmm.
Um, my role in the company is tech director. So right now we have like a tech team of about three, a few on art, marketing, um, producers, like the whole shebang basically. And then of course there's audio teams and things that we contract out for. So by the time like a game like this, by the time it's done, I think we had maybe like 35 people working across it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
That sounds like a nice. tight group, like a nice lean group, but all of the different bases are covered, so that's nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good, well-rounded group. I think some teams you end up stacked with a lot of people that are really strong artists, but maybe don't have a lot of technical background, or vice versa. So
Hmm.
this is kind of nice having like an even spread.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So how many of you had to be wearing the headset while you were actually working? I guess if you're an artist, you only put it on once in a while.
Once in a while, but more than you think, because
Okay.
things do actually look quite a bit different in headset versus like screenshots. And even our marketing team had to put on the headset for a while to try to get screenshots and things like that. And that was
Hmm.
I think that was a bit of a challenge for a lot of them, because a lot of people were just trying VR for the first time.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, most of the team, I think probably 75% of our team was in headset for most of the development.
Wow.
And I think that matters. Like if you're making a game specifically for a new platform like this, where people need to feel comfortable and need to not get sick and feel okay playing the game, it's really important to kind of get in there and actually feel like you're playing the game, feel what it actually comes across as.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, did you get used to wearing a headset a lot? Did it bring you any weird? How do I put this? Like when you came back to real life after being in a headset for a long time, was there any weirdness between the change of being in VR versus real life when you're in it so long?
Yeah, yeah. So I was already a bit of a VR junkie before this. I had like the original Oculus dev kits back when they started coming out, and I've used it quite a bit since, myself and a few friends, and I think it's once you hit like the maybe like 4 or 5 hour mark, which is a lot of time in VR. Then coming out of that headset, it genuinely feels like you're somewhere else for a little bit. And I know we're not alone on that. I know there's people talk about disassociation for a little bit if they
Hmm.
use it too much, and things like that. And that's another reason. Like when we went into dev for this, or development, we really had to look at those sort of aspects of this, because it's one thing to make a game, but it's another to make it accessible and comfortable for people. And everything, like all the challenges in that regard, were like ramped up to 11 here. So I think we got that.
Hmm. That's cool. I'm glad that you managed to figure out how to like work between deving and the headset. It sounds like you didn't have too bad of a time with it.
Yeah, it worked well. It worked well.
The team, are you guys? Do you get together or you work remotely? Do you have an office?
No, so we were remote pretty much from day one, and this was well before the pandemic or anything like that. So it was, I think it was just like a matter of like what worked at the time. We were a small startup. We didn't have a lot of funding yet. For a little while, we worked out of a back room in my apartment.
Oh,
Yeah, that was
wow.
my last apartment. And yeah, I mean, we filmed interviews and everything in there. So you'd have like a film crew come into my kitchen one day and set up, and then like another day it'd be just like three of us working in a bedroom. And so yeah, it like that was the closest we ever got to an office, and that went on for maybe a year. But as the team grew, it made a lot of sense to go online. And then once COVID hit, I mean, we already sort of had a good system for it,
Hmm.
so we just kind of ran with that, and I think it works really well.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you guys are. This is your second game as a team, or is there more than that?
Yeah, this is the second like proper full game that we've released.
And the one before that was the big con.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, and that was 2D. That wasn't like 3D or VR or anything
Wow.
like that. So yeah,
Wow. What a change.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I don't know. We wanted to make sure we're trying stuff that's new every time, and I think maybe we took that to the extreme a little bit this time. But
Hmm. You made
yeah,
it work though. You can tell that you made it work because you weren't crazy busy by the end of the project and all like burnt
yeah,
out.
yeah. As long as nobody's going like pulling their hair out at the end, I think I don't know. That's a good litmus test for
Hmm.
things going okay.
Yeah, for sure. So how long were you guys working on A Night in the Attic?
So a night in the attic, I think I'm awful with dates, but I think it was around 2021 where we entered full production.
Hmm.
So about 2 years of full production, but just the sort of nature of that project, like it was something that Andrea, the art director, and myself had started years before.
Mm,
So it was actually 2018 that the prototype was built. Um, and it was supposed to be a very simple, small project, but as those always end up going, it got bigger, and then we ended up bringing it to Mighty L as a sort of almost like a pitch, an internal pitch, and from there it gained a little bit of funding in VR. So the project as it is now, I would say 2021, but sort of like as a starting idea, five or so years. Yeah,
really cool. Okay,
yeah.
awesome. And so, okay, so speaking of bringing the idea to the company, um, you mentioned recently like you're doing you're thinking of a new game idea. Is that your personal project, or is that your like the company is ideating?
That's personal project.
Okay,
So
okay.
the company work is that's sort of done. Like this last game was a bit of an exception to the rule, despite being the second project so early. But yeah, a lot of the work is Dave Proctor, our the head of the studio, who sort of goes through and puts together pitches, and then we do internal game jams and sort of reach out. And a lot of it is going where the money goes. It's, if we can get some sort of backing for one of the jam ideas we came up with, then we'll run with that for the next project. So yeah, there's a few things in the pipe there. Nothing I can really talk about
Hmm.
without getting in trouble, but I think, yeah, I've always liked keeping my own side projects going, and as it turned out with the last one, it's, it pays off once in a while, so it's worth still pursuing.
Wait, so you've put out a game separate from my DL?
No, 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 no. But that last project, A Night in the Attic, that
Oh, it's
started as a personal game.
right. Gotcha. Okay, so now you're thinking like, oh, I want to make a game outside of my regular work. What kind of game are you kind of like wanting to make? Is it going to be a small one? Is it going to be a long term one? Is it like, and how are you coming up with the idea? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think if I solved all that, I probably would have made this game
Okay.
10 years ago already. But
Yeah.
so it's definitely one of those, like, I want to nail down an idea, and then, really really spend years trying to think of what the idea is. So yeah, I don't know. I think one of the big sort of pillars of thought that I have behind that um, is just because of looking at how many games get released a year, and how hard it actually is to sort of stand out and break out as an indie, especially as an indie of, like, in my case it would be an indie of like one or two people team. I want to make sure that we bring something that's really unique. So whatever I end up coming up with is going to be, it's going to be something weird, and it's going to be something that, like, a lot of people are going to, like, shake their heads at a little bit and wonder what is this about.
Hmm.
But yeah, I can't say for certain what it is yet, because I don't even fully know.
Okay, so you want to go like way more experimental with it.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, the stuff I've been looking at recently is that I thought was really neat is like online moments, sort of like cultural moments in internet history.
Hmm.
So, and I don't know if this is too much of a tangent, but
No, go for it.
Pokemon Go. I mean, that's like Pokemon's. It's kind of its own giant behemoth. But Pokemon Go and Twitch Plays Pokemon were, I think, two really good examples of one thing, like one experience that everybody sort of came together and played. So it was less that everyone's playing an individual game, and more that everyone's sort of coming together to try this experience as one thing. And there's been other pretty cool examples. Like Reddit did I think it was an April Fool's project called Place a few years ago, and it was just a giant canvas with pixels, and you could paint one pixel at a time, whatever color you wanted. And all the communities from Reddit came together and tried to, like, paint over each other's work, or tried to, like, claim little areas and things like that. And I think still that's still one of those sort of internet cultural history things um, that stood over the last, like, 5 or so years, however long since it's come out. And yeah, I don't know, chasing something like that I think would be unique in a more, like, indie game perspective.
So
So
you
so
want to
definitely, it's definitely something complicated.
So you want to create this big experience, or you want to see one of these big experiences and put it into an indie game?
I want to create one. I want to like. I know there's tons of problems with that, with networking and critical mass for a video game and things like that. But I think if you combine some good design practices with like safeties and stopgaps to make sure if there's not a lot of people who try this out, it'll still work. There's a chance to make something that like a lot of people share at the same time when they're playing,
Hmm.
and that's something I want to chase. I think that sort of community aspect of gaming is probably one of the most interesting. So
Yeah, no, I love that that's the direction you're going in. It's a really cool one, and I agree. I like when games can bring people together, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a complex, huge, elaborate MMO. It can be something more simple, but still just as fun.
yeah, exactly, and I think we're seeing a lot more of that now too. I mean, MMO used to be the one thing. Like if you're gonna talk to an indie developer and make a joke about like what game is completely out of the realm of what you could pull off, it was MMO.
Hmm.
But now we're seeing games like Rust and Ark and Valheim and games like that that are not really MMOs, but they sort of have those elements that blend over. And I think that's really cool. I think that's sort of the indie spirit
Hmm.
tackling ideas that we can't really pull off, but we find creative ways to get through.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. That's pretty cool. So, what kind of things are you doing to come up with an idea for this game?
Uh, it's a lot of research, a lot of time just spent looking at what's worked in the past for not necessarily for games, but just for experiences online or for media that's inspired a lot of people or has gone well financially or in terms of pitching.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, you also need to be able to make this, and that generally takes money, and you need to be able to pitch something like this in terms of or in a term. Sorry, I'm tripping over every word now. You need to be able to pitch these projects in a way that people will understand and actually be able to digest and maybe get behind. And I think
Right.
some of the more abstract ideas, like the stuff I'm coming up with or wanting to pitch, is definitely on the hard end of that. So it's looking at other sort of weird projects that have worked across other mediums and how they approached sort of growing from an idea into a full project.
Right. Yeah, I remember that Reddit thing where you paint one pixel at a time, and it's very straightforward and easy to understand, and you know what you're getting into as soon as you hear the description of it. So I think
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
hard to
despite
achieve, but and also make it fun. But I think
yeah,
that's part of what makes it actually take off is when it's like super understandable. You know what you're getting into. It's not a lot of work to figure it out. Yeah.
yeah, and I think like that one was a perfect example of like here's something that nobody's really done before. I mean, there's been some examples, but here's something that's still wildly different than most of the ideas out there, but you can still pitch it. I mean, there's still an elevator pitch, like, oh, within 5 minutes you could explain this idea to someone. So I think it's a bit of a balancing act of finding something that's new, but something that's not too crazy to try to communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any I mean, it sounds like things are pretty open still, but are there any like tools you know you're going to be using or any settings or genres that you're trying to aim towards?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a Unity dev. I've been using Unity for since Unity 4, so as long as that's been out.
Hmm.
And I swear by that tool. Like that's been my bread and butter in terms of work, in terms of sort of getting excited about new features and things like that. But I did dabble a little bit in web development a long time ago, more like back end stuff. And I think that a little bit of that is like there are artifacts of that time of my life still bleeding in, and I think that's why I'm looking at things like networking and like communities of players and games coming together. So yeah, there's probably some web tools that I would like to sort of brush up on to help in this world. But yeah, other than that, I mean, your standard suite. I've done 3ds Max for years.
Hmm.
Um, Before I knew I wanted to get into programming, I sort of went that direction. Photoshop is another one that, like, since the beginning of my game career, it was mods, like skin and texture mods in Photoshop.
Oh yeah, you did modding?
Yeah, Yeah, so that
That's
was
cool.
back in grade 8.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't really learn 3D until a couple of years later, but being in gaming clans at the time, I think, and wanting to stand out in gaming clans meant learning Photoshop and how to mod games.
Cool. Did you go straight into game development like after schooling? Did you go to school for game
I
development?
Yeah, so I tried to. I couldn't really find anything game development specific on the sort of university track, and I wanted to get to university because at the time everybody was told to go to university if you can.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, was fair, and I agreed with it at the time. And so I ended up going to York University for 4 years,
Hmm.
but it was very loosely related to games. It was a program called Digital Media,
Okay.
and the idea was sort of a blend of art and technology. So while we didn't really do games there, we did sort of cool things with digital art or Arduinos, so like hardware, like small like art projects that dealt with sensors and the more abstract stuff. I'd say like the more in the art realm than the maybe interactive game realm.
Hmm.
And then from there, I went to George Brown for 4 years because I still wanted to make games, and they had a games program.
So wow. So what program did you study at George Brown?
So I took the games programming
Games
course,
programming.
which is
Okay.
a 4 year course.
Hmm.
But they have this 1 year program called, well, actually I don't know what it's called, but it's a game design program, and it's a postgraduate program. And I didn't enroll in that, but I quickly learned in my program that sort of what I wanted to do was much more revolved around that 1 year program, the postgrads.
Hmm.
So I ended up skipping a lot of class and just going to the postgrad
Oh
program
wow.
instead.
Okay.
So I wasn't going to get any credentials for it, but it worked out really well because there were not a lot of programmers in this postgrad program, and so there were a lot of people with a lot of great ideas and visual backgrounds, visual arts backgrounds, but nobody to really implement those ideas. So I was in a good spot there to make a whole bunch of student games and get my name on a whole bunch of things and meet a whole bunch of really cool people.
Awesome.
And yeah, I just kept doing that, and eventually that's how I got into the industry.
That's cool. So you made a bunch of stuff in school. Did you go and like work for a studio right after? Or were you making did you continue making games with these people that you met?
Yeah, so it was about two or 3 years of that. I didn't end up finishing that program, but
Hmm.
I wasn't too worried because it wasn't really a technical background I was looking for. It was more just contacts within the industry.
Hmm.
And George Brown, I had heard, was really good for that, and it was. So there were a lot of profs working in industry, and we learned about a lot of events. And one of those events was Level Up, which is a student showcase in Toronto that happens once a year,
Hmm.
and all sorts of students from different schools in Canada come and show off what they've been working on that year in terms of games. And yeah, we ended up doing really well. Like about two or three games that I worked on ended up winning awards, and I think that opened a lot of doors for me. That's when I was introduced to the guys from Drinkbox, which is also a local studio, and yeah, I ended up getting a few interviews off of that alone, and that was sort of the one big break into the industry. So,
Cool. And what were you doing there?
so I was a designer there. I didn't work as a programmer, but
Okay.
um, I mean, it was technically level designer,
Okay.
but just because they were a smaller team too, and just by nature of the games we were working on
Hmm.
there, it became more of like a junior game designer role.
Hmm.
So designing enemies, designing levels, sort of new mechanics for like level mechanics and things like that. It was really across the board, which was a lot of fun.
Cool. That sounds good. And I guess you eventually went. You already had the ability to program games, but you kind of went through the level design route after your schooling and then went back into programming.
Yeah, yeah, because I didn't have a I guess a pure programming or maths background in university. Like a lot of people go through the computer science degrees, and they're admittedly a lot stronger programmers than I would have been in those years. And I think that showed a little bit. Like when I was applying for a lot of these roles, it was like, okay, I do understand programming, I do have some experience in it, and I can make things work, but I'm not coming in with like all the sort of learned knowledge that you would get from a degree or anything like that. So yeah, so that's what sort of led me into the design role. But to be honest, I think design is a lot more fun.
Hmm.
I think you get to do a lot more creative work, and having a programming background there is very useful because you can prototype everything it lets you communicate everything you're trying to come up with because you can build a version of it yourself.
Right. Very cool.
So
Yeah, that is a fun role to have. That's nice. Wow. So that's a lot of people, like when I'm streaming, a lot of people are asking about getting a job from, no schooling, game development schooling, and computer science schooling. So like you kind of have, you went straight into, you went directly. Like a lot of people don't go right into game development, but you went in directly. You did some schooling. You didn't do CS. What like looking back, what do you think is, if somebody's just like, I want to be a programmer for video games, what do you think that would be like the fastest or like the best way to get there?
yeah, I think I mean I hate the phrase "it depends" for answers like
Yeah.
this, but I'm going to use it because it does depend. It depends if you want to go for a larger studio, like a AAA studio.
Hmm.
Those roles are usually pretty defined and um, pretty focused in terms of like not wearing as many hats. So they're in a position where they do want to hire people with computer science backgrounds
Hmm.
for certain technical roles, and you're going to be competing against people with those comp sci backgrounds for technical jobs.
Hmm.
Um, so if you're going into that route, I would definitely suggest doing the university computer science degree. Um, Having that even just as a fallback if games doesn't work is just a really good degree to have. I mean, there's always programming rules if there's not game development roles.
Hmm.
But if you want to get into indie, I think it has a lot more to do with your ability to meet new people,
Hmm.
especially here, like in Toronto or anywhere that has a bit of a game scene,
Hmm.
and your ability to show off creative work. So that's making a portfolio. That's trying to like hook up with other people in the area to make games, doing game jams. I think the work speaks a lot more than the sort of academic background on this level.
Hmm.
And it's what like if you can show people that you're capable of getting something done and doing something that stands out a little bit, I think that has a lot of mileage.
Hmm. Now, do you think if somebody went the route of, so you're saying like these AAA studios are usually wanting the technical background. Do you think that if somebody like yourself who went into the more indie side of things, now you've got quite a bit of experience, would it be difficult to transition to a AAA studio? Or do you think you're kind of like, you're now in with like the indie scene and that's like your kind of best place to stay?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. So I'm definitely coming from that last question from the side of the technical roles. So tech director or programmer, or like eventually senior programmers or AI or anything like that.
Hmm.
I think it is a different story for design,
Hmm.
which is sort of the other half of the role. And I can't speak to art as much, but for the design roles, I think it is a little more portfolio based. So if you can show your work, and in my case, like now, coming from indie, I have a portfolio of a few released games, which AAA usually likes to see, from what I've heard.
Hmm.
Um, they like seeing that you can complete something and work with a team to actually release something,
Hmm.
even if this something doesn't do well. That's not really important. But they do source a lot of talent from smaller indie teams. So if that's the route you want to go eventually, going indie first as a designer is not a bad idea.
And a developer, do you think it still holds true? Same sentiment?
For a tech developer, I do think there's definitely a big challenge. And the other thing too is because so many people want to make games. I
Yeah.
think there's like I think it's such a popular sort of direction, especially if you're in programming,
Hmm.
because a lot of programming can be very mundane outside
Hmm.
of the games industry. So unless you're really into that, in which case great, you'll make a lot more money. Um, Unless you're really into that, you're going into something more exciting like games, and you're going to be competing with a lot of people for those roles. So
Hmm.
any sort of stronger technical background you can give yourself, any sort of extra edge in terms of being able to solve problems over other people is going to pay dividends.
Okay, interesting.
So,
Yeah, that's good to know. I like to ask these kind of questions because it does come up a lot, and I know a lot of people uh, struggle like what route to take, and it's not really that clear if these different degrees are necessary. And like going into computer science isn't a small thing. It's a big undertaking, but I think it's good for people to know like that's what you want to do. Like buckle up and go get that degree, right?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The common knowledge, or like the common phrase here that I always hear is like, if you want to go into games, don't, because if you really want to, you won't listen to me anyway. And if you're smart enough, you'll avoid it and go for something that
Yeah,
makes more
yeah,
money.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's funny. So, okay, so what kind of stuff do you do outside of game development? I can see so many interesting things behind you. We've got plants. I've already mentioned you've got like it's like an old radio. Is that like a
Yeah, yeah.
little
There's an old boombox and an old like TV radio sitting over there too.
Okay,
Um,
tell me all the things you do outside of game dev.
yeah, I mean, like I love doing projects. If it's in games or out games, if it's a project, I'll take it on, and that can go anywhere. That can go into taking old '80s technology apart and trying to like make it work with newer tech. That could be, just getting a whole bunch of plants and trying to see if I can keep that running for a year. But I mean, that was pretty standard COVID behavior,
Yeah.
I think. Or woodworking. So I dived into woodworking and took it as far as I could, which was like automated CNC machines and these big 6 by 6 foot rigs that I drag into my apartment and built a giant frame around and things like that.
Wait, hold up. Can you explain that whole thing again? What did you drag in? What did you build?
Yeah, so I don't know. I didn't want to do like hand woodworking. I wanted to try to capitalize on what I was good at, which was programming and sort of automating things. So I got into CNC machining, which is, it's, if you know what a 3D printer is, it works kind of like a 3D printer, but instead of printing it drills out material, so it can kind of like cut things out of wood or carve things out of wood. And yeah, I wanted to get really into this, so I bought a machine, and it was um, it's about 4 feet by 4 feet, and then maybe about a half foot tall. But I live in Toronto, and there's not a lot of space, so I don't have a workshop or anything like that. I do have neighbors. So by the end of it, I ended up building this basically 6 foot cubed box in a room in my apartment, and it's not in this room. I don't think my webcam can drag all the way there.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's just this giant box that I do woodworking in now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hard thing to explain to people without seeing this giant 6 foot cube in my house.
What kind of things do you make with it, and how do you navigate it? Like, do you use it often enough for it to be? Does it have its own room? It's got like a
It
little.
does. So I have an extra bedroom here. Like,
Mhm.
there's a room that wasn't supposed to be a bedroom, and I took that as a bedroom. Um, and I ended up making the larger bedroom into this workshop. The workshop's for anything. I mean, making miniatures, woodworking, 3D printing,
Hmm.
any sort of like crafty, weird thing I can get my hands on, I'll throw in that room and try to make something out of it.
Wow.
But yeah, it's things I make, like wooden maps. Like I got into this idea of sort of carving out 3D maps from
Cool.
games or from sort of fantasy settings. So
Whoa. That
things
sounds
like
really
that.
cool.
Or,
Is that done
yeah,
with the CNC machine, or is that done by hand?
that's done by the CNC. So the process is kind of like it's multi-step. So you're starting on a computer, you're doing 3D modeling, and so like for me, having a 3ds Max background was my sort of in on this.
Hmm.
And then you're taking that into a more um, sort of like another piece of software that's going to convert that model into instructions for the machine. And then coding helps me with that, and then finally you kind of kick all this over to the machine, and the machine just does its work. It's like watching a printer go.
That's so
Very slow
cool.
printer, because this takes about 20 hours
20
sometimes
hours.
to.
Okay, sorry if you said this earlier. Did you say how big the like products can be?
Yeah, so the projects can be, I think, I haven't pushed it completely, but there was a window we made recently for a promotional piece for for a night in the attic, and that was, I think that was about 3 feet by 3 feet. So
Okay.
which is pretty large,
Pretty
like as far as the
big,
stuff goes.
yeah.
Yeah,
How big do you make these maps? They sound so cool.
the maps are a lot smaller, just because it takes. I mean, whereas this window, it was more of a basic cutout. It took maybe a few hours, but the maps can take up to, like, 4 or 5 days straight of running this machine, which is a hard thing to pull off in an apartment. So
Wow.
so those are a lot smaller for now.
So could you theoretically take a few pieces of wood and do a bit at a time like tiles and put them together and make like a map of Westeros from Game of Thrones, like the tables that they have that are like,
Oh, 100%,
yeah,
100%. And that's sort of that's what got me into this. I got all excited about that one idea.
really?
For me, it was the map from, like, Dungeons and Dragons Forgotten Realms, which is
Hmm.
sort of the main lore there.
Hmm.
I don't know. It just felt like something I hadn't seen anyone do, and I got really obsessed with the idea, and it led me down this whole rabbit hole of a 6 foot cubed box in my home.
Wow.
But
So
yeah,
wait, from the D&D thing or from Game of Thrones?
no. So the map was going to be a D&D map, like a
But you
Dungeons
like
and
the
Dragons.
visual of the Game of Thrones tables that we're talking about, or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
intro?
yeah, yeah. That sort of idea, that same, like, the Game of Thrones opening, but it
Yeah,
was going to be, instead of Westeros, it was going to be a map from
I
this
see.
other, yeah, this
Very
other setting,
cool.
the D&D movie setting. They used it, I think.
So you could put them together and make some really big thing. Have you done tiling of them yet?
Not so much. Like, I did some tests of tiling, and I did some tests of, gluing different pieces of wood together, like different shades, and then kind of milling into it.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's really finicky still. I think there's a lot to learn with these machines. Like this, there are people that have careers just working on these machines,
Hmm.
and I'm just a hobbyist, and I'm still working too. So
Yeah.
so it's whenever I get like a little bit of extra time, I'll take on a little more
Is it
with it. But I'd say I'm still pretty much a newbie as far as it goes. So it's on the to do list.
is it difficult to sorry, is it expensive to and difficult to get the wood pieces to make the things?
I
You keep
mean, it
doing
can be.
projects all day, every day, or is it there's a limit here?
Yeah, I mean, like, you can use any type of wood. You could even use, like, aluminum if you're,
Oh,
I'd say, experienced enough, but I'm not.
okay.
Uh, but I mean, I've done a lot of work just on 2x4s, just to sort of learn how to do this. So, and scrap 2x4. I mean, here you can find it on, like, the side of the road at construction sites anywhere. So um, that, or I go online to, like, Craigslist, and some people are getting rid of, like, some really old junk furniture for free.
Hmm.
So I can, like, rip apart a chair and use the chair base, and then, like, just mill into that.
Wow.
So yeah, it's actually not too bad. I mean, if you want to go like more professional, there's places that sell, like, just really high quality wood.
Yeah.
So I've picked up a few of that to try, but it's always a lot more nerve wracking, because when you mess that up, it's, you've messed up like a $30-40 piece of wood.
So okay, like what does a mess up look like? What kind of things can happen?
Uh, a mess up could be, you like, it could be in any stage. So it's, the most popular, I'd say, is like when you're converting a 3D model to instructions for the machine.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up being a list of, like, the code that it's going to send to the machine is like thousands of lines long, and each one's an instruction.
Oh wow.
And sometimes you just kind of mess up, like, the math of, like, oh,
What kind of sorry.
yeah, no, 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 go
What
for it.
kind of what does the conversion look like? Or like you said you're doing math. Are you just like, oh, here's the measurements? Or are you like is it like programming?
Yeah, it's, I'm trying to remember the exact word. Parametric modeling, I think, is the
Okay.
word.
Uh-huh.
So you have, like, regular modeling. Well, regular modeling. What I'm used to is, like, freehand modeling in 3D software. So sort of doing everything through the scene view, or the viewport, and just kind of lining it up, and occasionally, like, making sure the numbers match, like, the widths and the sizes of whatever, like, primitives you're throwing in there. For this, it's all parametric, so it's all done by the numbers. So, I mean, you're writing in, okay, this is a circle with this radius and this offset, and if this other object scales, this is the relationship between that scale and this circle. So that, yeah, there's a lot of, like, sort of layered parts to it. It's very easy to make mistakes with things like that, especially when it's so dense with numbers.
Hmm.
So then you make a mistake and you don't really notice it until you plug the machine in and it's like 5 hours into a cutting job, and then suddenly you watch the drill bit just kind of shoot off,
Oh,
like drill, like dig into whatever you're making.
and you do this for fun?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Sounds
it's a
so.
little sadistic, but I don't know. I don't know. Everybody else went into bread making for COVID, and I didn't want to make bread, so I took on woodworking.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, programming is kind of like that too. Like your day job's already pretty challenging, but I'm surprised you take your spare time and then you do more technical and like stressful things. But it also sounds like a really cool result. So maybe it's worth it once you start getting into it.
Yeah, I mean, I never shied away from big projects. Like if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And that's backfired on me like thousands of times. But when it works, like this, it works really well. It's I mean, even if you don't pull off something amazing, like I've got this new skill set out of it. It's a good story. Like a lot of people
Mhm.
wonder, but like even just explaining this big soundproof box I had to build is like it's interesting. It's something fun at least. So yeah, it keeps me busy.
Wow. So, okay, you mentioned a few other things there too. What else is in this magic workshop of yours?
Okay, so another one I did last year was I got my hands. Actually, I don't know if you can see it. Well, not really. It's right in the middle there. It's a little like glass box.
Yes.
Yeah, it's probably not going to show up too well, but I got my hands on this like glass sort of like looks like a mini greenhouse,
Hmm.
but like very vintage looking from Kijiji or Craigslist or something. Some online person selling it. And I looked at it and like it seemed cool, but it was like, oh, this would look really cool if it had like a little water fountain in it and some plants growing. And so I started trying to figure out like what it would take to make that. And I didn't really want to do like fake rocks or like some people carve foam for miniatures into rocks and things like that for terrariums or for like I forget like lizard.
Aquariums and stuff like
Yeah, if they have like a small aquarium or something
that.
like
Mhm.
that. So yeah, I didn't really want to do that. I wanted it to be real. I hate knowing that it's like a fake thing or something.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same.
Yeah, yeah. So that led to me going like I ended up finding these like quarries around here and these like places that sell rocks in bulk, and this was like it took me like 6 months. I thought this was going to be a two week project, but I ended up going to this rock place, and everybody's dragging their 4x4 trucks, grabbing like tons and tons of rock for their backyards. And I walk up to the counter and I'm asking for like maybe it's like the scene of Little Rascals. It's like, can I get some lumber? Like it was like I was asking for like $5 worth of rocks so I could put it in my Honda and drive home and make a little fountain out of it.
Nice.
Uh, and so like they like that was funny too. It was like nobody's doing this sort of thing. It's such a left field sort of project to take on,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then it like that too. I thought it was going to be easy, and then I had like 2 months where my entire apartment was covered in rocks. And it was
What
like
were
I
you
go
What were you doing with the rocks once you got them?
well, like I had to put these rocks together to build like a little water fountain.
Ah.
But I didn't know what I was doing. I had never glued rocks before, glued rocks together. I'd never like built a rock formation before.
Hmm.
It's called hardscaping, which I learned.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I've never cleaned rocks or anything. Like I was completely out of my element here. But I mean, it was fun. Like I'd be like sitting in the shower washing these rocks off, and then the next day I'd go to take a shower, and the whole shower floor is covered in rocks
Oh my
still.
gosh.
Yeah, it was a little bit like what have I gotten myself
Yeah,
into?
that's funny.
Um, yeah.
So, how long did it take you to build this water fountain?
Oh God. I honestly think it was about like 5 or 6 months when I thought it was going to be two,
Wow.
because everything that could go wrong went wrong, and when you're working with water, everything goes massively wrong when it goes wrong.
Yeah.
So leaks all over the apartment floor.
Hmm.
Everything's soaked. My counter covered in rocks and like sticks and dirt and all this awful stuff. But at the end it worked. It's a little running fountain now, and you can't tell when you look at it that it was like a complete disaster when I made it. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Now I got some new skills out of it. I'm never going to do rocks or water again, but it's something new.
Now you've learned not to use rocks and water for
Yeah,
projects.
yeah, never again.
Important lesson. So wait, so you made a little water fountain out of these rocks, and you put it in this little glass atrium. Did you call it? Is that the right?
Yeah, terrarium, atrium. Yeah.
So it's about how big would you say? Like 2 feet tall?
Uh, yeah, I'd say about 3 feet
Three
tall.
feet tall.
Maybe I think it was exactly 2 feet wide at the base.
Okay, so about 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall. There's a rock water fountain in it. Is there other stuff in it? Is there plants or
Yeah,
like
there's plants in it. There's soil and water, and like it's got a little pond. I could do fish, but like judging by how hard I had of a time putting this together, I don't want to subject fish to it. Yeah, I'm a little worried about their safety on this,
what about
but
like a little? I feel like
yeah,
something should
yeah,
go in it now after all that work you put in. Like maybe a spider. I don't know.
a little spider. Yeah,
Something,
it's
something
got
to
open sides, so I'm not a spider person, so I'd be dealing with that. But
all right. Maybe not a spider
yeah,
then.
yeah, I don't know. We'll keep the lines open
Okay, I'll let you know if I
for
come
what goes
across
in
a
there.
small enough animal that looks like it might want a waterfall.
Yeah, a little frog or
Yeah.
something,
Oh, that'd be
maybe.
cute. A frog would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So, what else is in the workshop?
Uh, so I mean, it's all these one-offs, right? Like these
Mhm.
weird projects. Um, what's something else I did in there? Uh, okay, so I play Dungeons and Dragons, and when I got really into it, like when I first started playing a few years ago, I wanted to build miniatures for it,
Mhm.
like little set pieces, basically, not characters, but like a house or an environment or
Hmm.
things like that.
Okay.
Um, and that too, like I didn't know a thing about making miniatures. Like I'd goofed around with materials before, but never actually built something with a sort of purpose in mind. So I went into that, and it was like cutting up popsicle sticks. It was every arts and crafts trick I could find on Facebook, and yeah, building little houses. And I
Hmm.
mean those two, they were pretty big, and then running wiring and stuff through them so they light up, and
Ooh,
yeah, and a little fog machine, so there's like smoke that comes out and things like that.
cool.
Yeah, so I like anything I can try that's sort of new and weird. I'll take on in that room.
So you built all these little miniatures for D&D. Is that do you like fix them down to something, or do you take the pieces and make something each time you play? How does that work?
So I mean, I imagine you take the pieces and sort of mix them around every time you play. I got so into making these that it just like we stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then
Okay.
so I just kept making these because I just liked building the miniatures, and they
Mhm.
looked cool, and it was like fun challenge.
Mhm.
So I've never actually used them for D&D yet.
That's pretty.
Some of them have been sitting there for like 6 7 years now. Just
Wow.
yeah,
Okay. Wow. And so
yeah,
but they're all individual. So you just have like a pile of different cool little buildings and
yeah. I've got like a few little buildings. I've got like a little like sort of one-off things like fire pits, or like
ooh,
uh, what else do I got? Like furniture. Like I built one of
wow.
the things I built was like an old store, like a potion shop.
That's
So
so
it's got like
cool.
little
I would
shelves.
love to see this. Yeah, I will have to find. Do you take like pictures of it and put online or anything like that?
I took pictures, but I never put it online because I was it was going to be a surprise for the campaign I was making, but it ended up on the to do list for years. So
I feel like you should
other
do a
projects
little.
popped up, but I could share pictures.
You should do like maybe even like a little video or like something to just show what you did and the result because I bet you a lot of people would just appreciate seeing what went into it and what they can do because yeah, and just to look at it, it's kind of cool. It's inspiring.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely weird having projects like that are done that just never saw the light of day
Mm-hmm.
because everything takes so much work. So it's to do all that and not have that sort of release or payoff of like somebody seeing it is definitely a
Mm-hmm.
weird one.
Yeah, I mean they saw the light of day because you actually finished them. It's just a matter of sharing them with people at that point, which is
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, yeah. There's like that artist I was just thinking about the other day where he goes into nature. I keep forgetting the name of him. He goes into nature and he'll arrange like leaves in a certain way where it's all like a gradient around the tree stump and it's like starting like bright yellow and goes out to like regular soil color and like all
right.
these different things and then after he's done with it like just lets it go out into nature and like it's ephemeral it doesn't exist
Yeah,
for very long it's not meant to be for anything it's just the purpose of making it which is I mean by the sounds of it something that you enjoy is making it not necessarily having sharing it or having something done.
yeah, and I think that's a tough one because I think I mean we could go into a whole topic of like how social media affects all this stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very hard to make something and not share it. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's wrong to want to share things. I mean, like a lot of what we make, like we want to be connected and we want to communicate with other people. And I mean, you want people to like what you make, right? Like you want to feel validated in a sense. But I've definitely, like in the last few years, I've definitely, I guess, sort of wrangled with the idea of like making things for yourself or making things just for the process of making them.
Mm-hmm.
I think for any like artist in the broad sense of being an artist, I think any artist should try that a few times because it's really interesting to kind of have something that's entirely, it's almost like a secret. It's all yours.
Mm-hmm.
Like you learned how to do it, you made it, and like you can sort of draw on that when nobody else knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I don't know. I really respect artists that can pull that off. Like the Leaves guy. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, actually, now when you put it that way, now I kind of want to do like a little secret art project that nobody else gets to see. It's just my own thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's just
Yeah.
tucked away, and nobody has to find out about it. But
Mm-hmm. It's kind of
yeah.
fun. It's kind of nice. You mentioned a few other hobbies outside of the workshop, modding old computers.
Sorry.
Did you say you modded old computers as well? That's not in
Yeah,
the workshop, but it's something else you do, I take it?
yeah. So that was. I mean, that's another thing too. It's just like one-off projects. So in university, we learned how to use Arduinos, which are, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the
yeah.
little mini computers.
Yeah, so like Raspberry Pi or Arduino, like
Hmm.
anything in that sort of wheelhouse. I'm not great with them, but it's enough to make things work,
Hmm.
and I think that's the idea with them
Hmm.
most of the time. So yeah, a friend and I started, collecting all these old, like the boom boxes or these old TV radios, or I got my hands on, it's like one of the first personal portable computer models.
Hmm.
Not necessarily the first, but it just looks really cool. It looks very like military-ish.
Hmm.
And so I've been spending a while trying to gut that and try to um, sort of build it into, like, I guess a cyber deck is what they're called. So it's just like a goofy a laptop. Like it's not very practical in most senses, but it looks really cool. It looks like something out of like the movie Hackers or something. So
Okay, so wait a second. Is this um so you was it working when you got it?
no, 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 no.
Okay, so it's
It's
broken.
yeah, yeah,
And are
yeah.
you
So
trying to get
it's
it to work before you make it look cool, or is it just the aesthetic part of it? Or is it gonna be Arduino? Like how does this all come together?
Yeah, so it's just the aesthetics. I'm basically trying to keep. So I keep the frame. It's like a big plastic frame.
Mhm.
It had a really nice keyboard, but I couldn't get the keyboard to work. So I ended up
Mhm.
replacing the keyboard and the monitor and stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, but the sort of like, so the guts are all different. Like it's running off a Raspberry Pi. It's got like a few extra pieces in there to like manage a keyboard and manage some like external stuff, like an extra battery and things like that. But like in the end, it still looks like one of these like old school. It was called an Amstrad computers. So yeah, and there's just like, we ended up finding a community online of people that build these things, and we got involved in that. And we started posting pictures and stuff, and like that's a project I was sharing, and yeah, it's really cool. A lot of people really got behind what we were working on with that. So
That's cool. Well, it sounds like a fun project.
yeah, yeah, and it's nice because it's tech, but it's not programming,
Hmm. Yeah,
which is
nice to
fun.
just make your own screen instead of being in front of one all the time, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You
That's
can always
cool.
use more screens too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Why not? Throw some more screens on the wall,
Yeah.
on the table. Cool. Well, that sounds like you've got so much going on. How do you even manage all of this, actually? How do you manage to do all those things?
Uh, Honestly, I think like the truthful answer when you get down to it is I don't. A lot of projects end up on the sideline or shelved for a couple of years and things like that.
Hmm.
Uh, but I mean, it's enough that I have a lot of fun doing it. Like my work still gets done for the job, and as long as that project keeps moving, then everything else doesn't really matter where it ends up. It's just sort of what happens along the way. So yeah,
Cool. Oh, that's really cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing all the cool projects you've done and some stuff about, how your work is and how your side game projects are. Yeah, it's been interesting.
yeah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me get the chance to talk about that stuff. I don't really, a lot of these projects they get sort of shut away, or things I do get sort of lost in time. So it's fun to get a chance to talk about
Yeah,
things.
it's too bad. I'm glad I got to hear about it. It's really neat. Do you said you don't really post the stuff, but you do share some things on social media, do you not?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So
Where can people
uh,
find any of the things you make?
yeah, so I mean, across all social media, I usually have the same username, which is JEO77. So it's Twitter, Reddit. Um, I mean, Facebook. Sometimes I post there. Instagram, I post projects there sometimes. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the project, but a lot of the stuff will end up somewhere online.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Well, thanks again. It was nice chatting with you.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye.
See ya.